Welcome to the 33rd episode of the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt. Carson. Good evening, Tanner. How are you?
I am wonderful. It's been a really good week. I have a neat topic for us to kind of go into. This is my week of kind of choosing and leading you along. Last week, we got to talk about e-commerce, which is one of the things you were really kind of diving into and all the neat tools. And since then, I read books every week. And there's a book I mentioned on a previous podcast, which was 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Well, I got that book finished and there were so many darn good points on it. I figured, crap, I'm just going to go over it with you on the podcast. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. So for reference, I have not read the book. I did read an exhaustive list of notes that Tanner created and then also used ChatGPT to summarize the book for me.
So you basically read the book.
You know what? In bullet point form, you betcha. No.
Yeah. So for the most part, I mean, we're not going to outline the whole book. I just want to kind of go on some key takeaways of that. But so the whole premise of the book, though, is seemingly impossible goals are more practical than possible goals because impossible goals force you outside of your current level of knowledge and assumptions. So the main thing is very few pathways to create like 10 times where you're at, right? So if you want to say, I'm making, I don't know, let's just do a number of $100,000 a year. And if you want to go 10x, I want to make $1 million a year. Well, you can't just do what you're doing and just work harder to get that. You actually have to kind of think outside the box. So they talk about 10x goals enable you to clearly identify the 20% of things and people in your life that are producing the most results and the 80% of things and people in your life that are holding you back. So it's kind of that 80-20 Pareto principle where most of the stuff you're doing actually really isn't getting too much value and 20% of the things that you're doing are generating all of the value. And it's a really neat concept to think about where if you analyze what is in your day and what activities you're actually spending time on, what are the valuable things moving you forward on your goals? And then if you're also thinking about, I want to go extremely far, like AKA 10x, I have a very ambitious goal. What are the things that I need to do to get there? And what is all the chaff that I need to kind of sweep away that isn't there? So stopping at that point, what are your thoughts?
So the obvious response to I make $100,000 now, I want to make $100 million or $1 million next year or whatever. The obvious immediate response is, oh yeah, right. So, okay. So the concepts of making your goals and cutting out unnecessary stuff so you can focus on your goals, that's not anything new. What does it say are actionable steps? Because there's a big difference from going from $0 to $10 versus 100,000 to $1 million. There's a huge gap there, and it seems very simple to say, "Oh, cut out the unnecessary stuff so you can focus on your goals." But what's this book's message delivering differently for you? Because every business book in the world, every inspirational book in the world says, "Cut out unnecessary distractions and focus on your goals." What's different with this one?
Well, it's just showing, first part of that is it's showing you that if you're not thinking big enough, you tend to keep a hold of old processes and things that you've been doing prior. So the quote, to quote kind of from the book, it says 2x is linear. To continue growing requires more effort. It's working harder, not smarter. It is quantitatively focused. So you're just doing more of what you're doing now without respect to quality, uniqueness, or transformation. Compared to 10x, which is nonlinear, enormous growth does not require more effort, but often requires less, but better. It's qualitative rather than quantitative. And you elevated your vision and focus in such that you're not transforming the value and impact of what you do for increasing increasingly simple people. You're elevating your vision and focus. So now that you're transforming the value and impact of what you're doing for increasingly specific people. And so this is where a little bit Dan was talking about in one of our previous episodes of not everyone's your customer. You got to figure out what unique thing you can offer to them that's high value and that you can get from there. And we think about it a lot of the times where you're just like, I want to grow my sales by 50 or like 15% a year. And usually the only ways you get there are like, well, we just got to make more calls. We got to touch more people, produce more widgets. We got to get things in more hands. We just got to do what we're doing now. But oftentimes that's ultimately it's more frustrating, difficult, going to get you into bottlenecks. And it's not going to transform the way your business. You're not going to grow to that next tier just doing what you're doing now. So forcing yourself to think bigger is really kind of the key aspect of this book. And like you said, it's not actually anything new or innovative. I was actually listening to a podcast about John D. Rockefeller. And there's a really good book that I read before called Titan, which is a biography of him by Ron Chernow. And back in the late 1800s, so 150 years ago, what he used to do was he talked about having all of his management teach all of their subordinates how to do their job. So you were never to actually do the tasks yourself. You were always thinking about what could you do to make Standard Oil bigger and make it more profitable and make it more money. So John Rockefeller recognized that offloading all of the 80% of, and what this book referred to as the 80% of the work, which is just a lot of the tasks that you're doing, but not actually producing value, compared to the 20%, which is the book calls your unique ability, something that you can bring to the table, is what's going to give you this high growth. So this is something that I think we've been doing for hundreds of years. We're just putting it in the context of today.
Do you have a modern day example of a company running like that? Because I'm just thinking, like, if every manager in an industry or a company taught their subordinates to do their tasks, it sounds wonderful. From a lean guy, I'm down. I wonder if there's a modern example of that. I would love to find a modern case study of that because I haven't seen that, but I would love to. The concept is great. And it leads into a lot of principles that Rockefeller probably kind of molded himself over the years of things like standard work and waste elimination and all of those things. For example, what you were saying there, what kind of perked up my spidey sense is in a couple projects I've done in the past based around standard work. The concept of standard work is you have 10 people who do the exact same job. Chances are good it's going to be done 10 different ways. So you standardize the tasks and processes and blah, 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 blah. But it goes deeper in that some companies fail to understand that standard work is almost guaranteed a failure. If you start with the people on the line, the lower level employees, which leads to another principle called leader standard work. And the concept is the higher you get up in an organization, the less standardized your tasks and expectations are. Meaning, if you're a brand new employee working on the line at a manufacturing plant, 90 to 99% of what you are expected to do is standardized. There's a process. You're supposed to follow it, do this, and spit out a widget at the end. The higher you get up into a corporation, the concept says that less of your work is standard. So all the way up to a CEO, I believe the expectation is that 5 to 8% of a CEO's job is standardized, whereas the other 92% of what they do is ad hoc, making decisions, calling shots, flexing and moving to whatever's, unique situation they're in. And that's why when we go into a standard work exercise, we always start with leader standard work. We start at a manager, director level even. and standardize their work. And by that we say, what do you have to accomplish by the end of the week? It's blah, 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 blah. What do you have to accomplish by the end of the day, every single day? Blah, 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 blah. What do you have to do quarterly, monthly, etc.? And you break it down and you really try and eliminate all of the crap. Well, like, oh, I've got to fill out this report. Okay, we understand that, but really, what do you need to accomplish by the end of the day, right? And you standardize that and cut out that. So I can't spout this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure Rockefeller had a huge part in my own profession, lean, and developing that in its very, very early stages. Probably not even recognized as one of the founders of lean, but these concepts all sound very familiar to me. So you're speaking my language, Tanner.
So John D. Rockefeller is probably somebody that you're going to get into and just completely lose your mind on. All of these practices that he was obsessed with is exactly what you're obsessed with. There was a story he talked about where, so they used to produce their own barrels, and they had solder that they would put to seal the oil barrels with it. And he asked the person doing it, he's like, well, how many drops of solder are you using? Like, we use 40. He's like, can you try 38 and see if there's actually a result? And so they tried it for a little while, and they found a certain percentage of the barrels leaked. And so he's like, well, what happens if you do 39? And so they tried 39. There were no leaks. And way out years later, after he's in retirement, he's like, well, because they were working at such a large scale, and this is the whole point of Rockefeller, is massive amounts of growth, which is why I really think it tie it to this 10X thing. Because his thing was, I'm not just going to be the biggest person in my town. I want to own the industry. And he was the perfect example of a monopoly that got broke up. But through that one drop of solder saved them, I think he said $15,000 the first year. And this is in the 1800s, by the way. And then every year that compounded because they kept doing exponentially more and more business. And over the course of his life, it saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars just due to one drop of solder. And he did this on every aspect of his business. So his competitive edge was completely about how they could keep their costs as low as possible, their operation as efficient as possible, so they could have the best margins to outcompete everybody. And when it came to open the books, no one could compete with them. And the really striking thing too, in his entire career, and oil especially was the most volatile industry with booms and busts, he never lost a dollar in a year. He was always in the black. He never had a red year. So that just shows like the amazingness of his genius going into this. And then the other thing that I really got from him that I love off this book too is it was a couple things. One was he was a master of concentration. And that's something I want to dive into a little bit later in the podcast. But he would spend a lot of time thinking about the best way to do something and just agonize over every detail, lock in all of the risk, all of the variables, the best ways to do it. But once he went to execute, he would execute fully. And he always did this with people too. He would find somebody who could do a job amazingly. He was always recruiting. And especially if they could do something in the business better than him, he would test that. He would throw them into the deep end, as he would say, and see if they would sink or swim. And if they swam, he'd put him in charge of it. And then he just left them alone entirely because he was completely, and he knew that they were right. But again, it was that focus of, you run this, but I don't want you doing any of the busy work. I want you to think about what you've solved and then teach someone else to do that and constantly be in problem solving mode. And I think that is in a perfect alignment with what you were talking about with managers. It's not just doing the tasks because they're familiar and they're easy and then you're the only person who can do them. It's like, no, the moment you figure it out, make it a process, teach someone else to do it, you focus on the future of the business. And if you have everybody doing that, and in this book, what they refer to it as they call it a self-managing company, is kind of the ultimate goal where everybody feels enabled. You have a clear vision and of where you're all heading. Everyone can the results you get then are exponential and unforeseen and not micromanaged, and it's pretty unique. And then just a quick quote from the book, and I'll let you continue. there was a quote that said, even if you shoot for the moon and you miss, you still end up in the stars. And I think that's kind of the overarching theme of this. If you're not shooting big enough, you're never going to end up far enough. So if you're kind of calm and steady and just low risk, you're always going to be paced by the person who, may fail in certain things, but are still going to succeed in so many others because they were thinking bigger.
So all of this is great. And this stuff, this speaks to me in my personal profession. The problem with my personal profession is we deal in future state and Shangri-La type scenarios, future state, ideal future state, those sort of things. The business concept you're talking about are amazing. Why aren't more businesses doing it? Because I'll be honest, and this is, I don't have insight into every business in the world, but every business I've ever seen does not do this, nor anywhere close to this. So what are we missing? Why are these not implementable steps?
So in the book, it says that people tend to have an inflated aversion to loss, which makes letting go of the 80% feel painful. However, when you see it properly and gain perspective, you realize that letting go of your 80%, whatever that may be, is actually a huge gain. Letting go of something that is no longer serving you is a massive step forward. So again, we have this concept of loss aversion, and you're living more in the past of you're thinking about, well, because I did this before, this is what led me to here, and that's what's going to shape me to the future. So in this kind of 80% mindset, as Dan Sullivan talks about, he's like, you're letting your past take you to where you are today. When you're in this 20% mindset, you're seeing where you are today and where you want to head in the future. And then he counteracts that, though, and they're also the author of a book I think we referred to before called The Gap and the Gain. And I know you've read that one. But he talks about how this mindset, you counteract it with how you actually measure, though. So if you're thinking about your vision and you're planning your course around from where you are now to where you want to go, that'll lead you exponentially further than thinking of where you've been to where you are now. But when you measure your progress, you don't want to measure in what he refers to the gap of your future state. You do want to measure from where you've been and how you've been growing, so you can have different successes and wins, and you're not always trying to walk towards a horizon that you're never going to meet. So it's really about setting certain ambitious goals in your life. And you can even think about different times where you've, quote, 10x'd before, where you've made monumental leaps from, being a child and going to school, finally graduating and going to college, getting different types of jobs, careers, learning different types of skills, all these different things before you started at like a very low level or a baseline, and then you became exponentially more things. So it's like this 10x mindset of growing significantly from where you were, you've done before, you just may not have recognized it. And then you probably are not doing it at a scale of business thinking either. But you can realize, oh, I can take these same principles and it is achievable. I could take myself from doing $1,000 on an average weekend sale to doing $10,000. What are the steps for me to get there, compared to just thinking, okay, I did $1,000 now, I want to try to do 1,500. So I'm just going to order more of this, and I'm going to try to stay out and talk to this many more people. It's like, no, if you want to go big, you got to fundamentally shift your mindset about what's going to actually get you there.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like it's not necessarily about setting gigantic goals and getting a bigger ruler. It's about maybe you need a completely different type of ruler and a completely different path. It's not about, I sell $1,000 a month, I want to sell $10,000 next month. It's more about, and I'm assuming the 10 we keep talking about is just kind of anecdotally not important. What it is about massive change versus steady growth, which most successful ingrained companies will have steady growth, give or take, some issues. What you're talking about is explosive, iterative growth. You're not going steady across the bar graph here. You're instead changing something, you're jumping up huge here, you're figuring it out, you do something else different, you jump. It's that explosive iterative growth, versus just steady state operations and hoping that the market carries you a little higher every month. Oh, I got 3% more in gross margin this year, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I want to call that out. The 10 number is just,
it's arbitrary.
It's arbitrary. It's about setting a goal that is, you would previously believe would be impossible, and not just setting a goal arbitrarily because it could be impossible, but maybe you'll end up in the stars. It's about shifting your mind. And I'm asking this in the form of a question to you, Tanner. Sorry. I'm just letting my mind wander. It's about not just setting a massive goal. It's about looking at it from a completely different perspective. If you need 10,000 in sales versus 1,000, you can't operate how you did yesterday. I think there's no one in the world who could argue that point. You're not just going to get 10,000 sales because you made more phone calls, right? You have to do something drastically different. So it's starting to click in my head. Ignoring that 10 number helped me a lot. It's about shooting out there and doing something crazy and drastic and different.
Yeah, it's always about going back to first principles about what actually matters, right? So we're talking about quality rather than quantity. Because so many businesses, again, if we think about like, oh, I want to increase my sales by 10% this year. Well, maybe they add a different product line. And then next year they got to add another product line. And then they're managing all these different things. And then eventually they just become so inefficient that they get bogged down. But if you're thinking, okay, instead of going 10%, I want to go 10x or, that 1,000% of where I'm at now. It's about actually distilling down to the essence of what is most effective. Who are the people that you could best serve? What are you uniquely bringing to the situation? And then just going all in on that. And that's where it's talking about it's actually easier and less complicated to go 10x than it is 2x. Because if you think of this weird amalgam that a lot of businesses come where they have all sorts of different weird product lines and sales, like revenue sources, and they get all this and they have to support them and they don't do anything super well and it's complicated and no one knows what the left hand is, doing to with the right hand. It just gets crazy over time. But if you're very focused and very aggressive off these things, you can leverage that. And the other thing, and we talked about this before with the idea, like Mr. Beast was talking about, like how you can get to, what was it? Instead of, this was in a previous episode, it's easier to get one video with 5 million views than it is 10 million or 10 videos with 500,000 views. And it's because it's easier to focus everything into one thing and doing it exactly right. But you don't have to be 10 times better to do that. You only have to be slightly better. And this book talked about that as well. The things to go all in on, you only have to be 10% or 20% better than your competition to actually get those rewards. And to bring that back even to that Rockefeller story, he was selling a commodity. He was selling oil. His oil was the same oil as everybody else. His edge came for he could run everything cheaper than them. So he could always undercut them. And due to his size, then he started developing all these like schemes and monopolies with railroads to get rebates. And then just he could always deliver everything with a higher margin. So he could do business where it would bankrupt other people. He could still make money. And that's where his competitive edge, because he was so focused on doing everything just right. And that's where this kind of talks about as well.
So speaking of monopolies, let's circle back this conversation in relation to entrepreneurs. How can you relate 10x to entrepreneurs? Because you're talking about Rockefeller and we're talking about massive manufacturing, 100-year-old companies. Awesome. That's great. Good for them. But that's not our audience. How can we relate this 10x principle back to entrepreneurship, smaller businesses?
Well, I would say this is some takeaways that everyone in their lives can do as long as they can give themselves a certain amount of freedom. So this book itself is very geared towards entrepreneurs because you're self-employed and you do have that freedom to make these decisions on your own. But it got me thinking about kind of the 80-20 in our own lives. Like what are we doing day-to-day task-wise that honestly, we could have someone else do them. But then I was like, wait, there's this new thing coming out right now in terms of automation called AI. We talk about it every single week. What AI stuff could we use to cut out the 80% of the stuff that just really doesn't matter, so we can focus on that 20% that is our unique ability, that is our reasoning and capability, all the stuff that AI can't do, and we can offload all of the stuff that it can do well enough. So I thought about that might be a neat subject to kind of dive into for us, to think about what tools and resources that even you and me could do in our daily lives to offload and just focus on the things that actually matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into that and talk a little bit about tasks that the average person will do on a daily basis. Are we talking business related or personal?
I would say work is probably the biggest place to focus at first, but there is certain things we could probably touch on in our lives if it's relevant as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about the bane of everyone's existence. And if you say it's not, you're lying. Meetings. Holy cow! Talk about a bottomless pit of waste. Did I tell you the story about how I got in trouble by measuring salaries in a meeting once at a company?
Share it, please.
Oh, God. This is the very first time I got a serious talking to after I'd started my professional career. I was working for a senior vice president. I worked directly for a senior vice president of an extremely large, well-known company. And I was working in the process improvement sphere, and part of my role is to kind of identify opportunities. I have always been and will always be an extreme vocal hater of meetings. 80-20 rule, I'd say meetings are more like 90% worthless, 10% kind of valuable, but probably could still be in an email. With that said, so what I did one day, this is a bad move. I stumbled upon average salaries based off of position and role. And in those very large old companies, they are very vertical companies, meaning that you have your new hires fresh out of college or wherever, and then you have maybe a lead and then a supervisor and then a manager and then maybe a senior manager and then maybe a director and a senior director and a VP and a senior VP and blah, blah. It just keeps going on. It's a vertical organization. First and foremost, already inefficient, irregardless. So I found average salaries based off of position. So what I did is I created a dashboard in Excel. I originally started as a business intelligence analyst, so I lived in Excel. And what I started doing is when I went to meetings, whether it was with my peers or with the peers of my boss, who was a senior VP, I was nowhere near. I would plug in the estimated salary of each person in the meeting and then break that down by the time. So if you were a senior VP, maybe you make X number of dollars a year. I broke that down to how much you made hourly. This is a 30-minute meeting. I type in what kind of level of people were in the meeting, all of them, times the time, and create a dollar amount. So I used to go into meetings and type this up, and I would start pointing it out to my boss, be like, hey, did you know that 1 hour meeting just cost $32,000? I thought it would be the most eye-opening, shocking revelation to ever strike business. And I was just so young and naive in my career. And finally, I got the stern talking to that said, you need to chill it. We're going to have meetings. I was like, okay, fair enough. But what I'm trying to say, where I'm trying to get with this is meetings are the intention behind most meetings are what? To share and disseminate information. To get a collective opinion back and to maybe make a plan moving forward. All of that we've already proven through COVID and remote work is relatively obsolete. Most meetings, in my opinion, can be reduced and, cut out small talk. That's my antisocial behavior. But where can AI help in that? Well, there are tools that can record, take notes, summarize. I apologize if you can hear my dogs so much right now. But there are AI tools that will listen in on your meeting. They will transcribe them instantly. They will summarize the points, put them into bullet points for you. And you can even hook them up to bots that will instantly email it to all of the attendees. Here's the points and the summary of the meeting we just had. How cool would that be, right? So meetings are the first thing that come to mind.
I would even go a step further. So scheduling of meetings takes a considerable amount of time. You have the dreaded reoccurring meetings that are, somewhat useless, but a lot of times you're trying to meet with outside people, outside your organization, meet with people in your lives. Having an AI based digital assistant do those things for you is going to be an extreme amount of time saver. The other thing, like you were talking about, is having it auto generate agenda lists, talking points, main things to keep you on track within the meeting. So everyone is aware of what is going to go into this. And there's a book by Cal Newport that's called A World Without Email. And he kind of talks about this, where you end up in this hyperactive hive mind where people are just doing meetings for meeting's sake and email for email's sake. AI has the potential to eliminate a lot of that clutter because it can, like you say, disseminate a lot of information over beforehand, keep things ready, and make it so people themselves would be like, well, I already know what's going on. We probably don't need to do this meeting. And it just kind of eliminates that need in the bud. But like you said, if there is a real task for a meeting, the ability to have everything recorded, transcribes, live notes, live action items gives a lot of power for going back to concentration. So you can focus solely on the conversation with the other people in the room. You're not trying to write notes. You're trying to break away and multitask and do all these different pieces. You can be completely absorbed with who you're actually meeting with. Because especially if you're an entrepreneur or a salesperson or different people, you need to be focusing very deeply on the person you're talking to so you can get the most out of your time for that. So I think there's a huge amount of things. Again, if we go back to that 80-20 rule, what is the 20% that matters from the meeting if you have to do it? And then how can AI and a lot of these tools cut away that 80% of stuff that doesn't matter? So I think you're immediately right there. The other things that come in too are, to keep with the subject of A World Without Email, is email itself. I'm of the full belief that email as we know it will be gone in just a few years, because every email will be written by an AI bot and then be read by and summarized by an AI bot. So eventually we just won't use email the same way. But as it stands right now, we still use email. But you can use it right now for things like filtering spam, categorizing all your messages, having suggested replies or auto replies on certain subjects. I mean, this is very basic stuff that AI just makes better. But if you have, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you're spending a lot of times on customer inquiries, you can automate a lot of that stuff automatically just to, again, not spend a lot of time on it. So I don't know. What are your thoughts in the email world?
Yeah, I would like to learn more about the tool potential there. As someone who lives in his email, I think conceptually it's hard for me to imagine a world without email. I know with the power behind AI and other tools, the opportunity exists. I don't know what that is, but I would love to explore it, because I think much like meetings, email becomes kind of a comfort tool of business. And what I mean by that is, if you're getting emails and you're sending emails and you're checking emails, you're probably busy. Same if you're having meetings, you're making meetings or transcribing meetings or whatever, you're busy. But it's, if you really break it down, the 80-20 rule, exactly as you said, is there value in that, in sending emails? Is there value in digging through those and checking them all the time? Without a replacement, you can make an argument. But if there is a way to transfer knowledge differently, I am not opposed to completely eliminating email. Absolutely.
Well, think of how many emails you have to send to set up a meeting, to get everyone prepared for the meeting. Then you have the meeting, and then you have emails following up the meeting. And then there's always these discussion points of what happened with the information in the meeting. Just imagine with these AI tools, one, them being able to set up an agenda, get everything ready for you based off a very limited amount of information that you need to give it. And then when you have the meeting, all of the emails after, the inquiries, the questions, the AI can generate those responses because it already knows the answers, because you're not creating any unique information from it. It is only where there is new information or new processes that need to be developed would you ever need to be pinged for it. And that would just be, again, a to-do list item on your list for you to go figure out a solution to a problem, and then the AI itself would just distribute that answer to everyone who potentially would ask it. So again, you think about, like, what is a world without email with AI? It is very much just someone interacting, asking a question, and it going through a large series of information and knowledge that you have done by actually operating your business and through your processes and all these things, and just like a chatbot giving the answer. So I mean, it's pretty neat. And if you think about the amount of time that that would free you up, again, to focus on the 20% of things that matter in your day, especially as an entrepreneur, when everything's on your shoulders, or if you're in a small company, or you're just trying to, make it on your own and you don't have a team of people, behind you, it gives you that same effect of having a team, because it's like you have a team of assistants. And that was really my idea, because I was reading this book about, offloading 8%. I was like, man, maybe we need to hire like an assistant or something to help us, like with the podcast, we're always trying to schedule guests and get things edited and getting things posted and making sure it's just a lot of stuff that's very repetitive. Maybe we should be, offloading that to a worker. And so we can focus again on the things that matter, which is producing better content. And then I was like, wait, AI can do a lot of this stuff. And then it got me thinking again of other stuff. So we've hit on email, we've hit on meetings. What else do you think that you could replace yourself with?
Well, I think a lot of the use cases can be summed up in a category. It's personal and professional interest of mine is knowledge management. And and I don't know, and I'm trying to explain this, knowledge management in the sense of a business. and for example, one of my favorite projects I ever did for a company was implementing a knowledge management tool. And this knowledge management tool was called Guru. And I fell in love with this tool because of what it did for people. First off, you had it could be web-based or an app-based, whatever it was. And essentially you work with your training and development and your leads and your subject matter experts to extract all of that wonderful knowledge that people sometimes keep up in their heads or on sticky notes at desks. And you insert that into this system and you tag it with keywords and you do all these fun things. And then essentially with pretty simple cues into the system, you could find up the currently approved accurate answer to whatever question you may have in that category. Why I loved this tool so much was that it went one step further and it had this web plugin. And what would happen is if you used like Gmail or Outlook or whatever, but within a web browser, Guru would overlay over top of it. And it would say, oh, you're writing an email to Bob Dole. I don't know. That was probably a horrible example. Bob Dole. And the email is about your customer success relationship regarding XYZ tool, blah, 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 blah. It would see that you're writing what you're writing about. And it would say, oh, you're writing about our, gold tier option. And it would produce everything about that gold tier option, to the point, depending on how you put it in the system, you could literally just copy and paste. Or it would say, is this what you're talking about? You'd click a thumbs up and it would insert it for you. And you would have the current, company approved, subject matter expert approved answer at your fingertips by simply just reading the screen. That was before AI. That was 2019. I think I implemented this tool for a company. And, I think about this so much now with the rise of AI, because at that point I was like, this tool is amazing and it's going to change the world. Now with AI, it can take that to a whole other level. Exactly what you're saying, identifying what you're doing, identifying what you're attempting to get at, and fill that information in for you. Knowledge management, not even just for a business, but for on your personal life as well. Understanding your intent and filling it in would save so much time and effort, or, having to ask your cubicle mate, hey, what do I do in this situation? Or pinging a supervisor. None of that is necessary anymore, because we have the ability to get the most accurate, up-to-date answer for any question regarding your product or service into a system that will autofill this in for you. Whether it's email, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an in-person meeting, it can pull it in real time, and you're right every time. So all of this kind of funnels up to knowledge management, which is exactly what AI is. Large language models is knowledge management on a epic scale, right?
Exactly. And it comes down to, you'll have a personal AI that is for you and your your personal knowledge. I love that word, knowledge management. So there was a product demo of a wearable AI device, and it would see what is in front. And the person gave an example of, like, here's a candy bar. Can I eat this? And it would tell him, like, oh, you have this type of food intolerance. You shouldn't eat this. And he's like, oh, I'm going to eat it anyway. And the AI was like, oh, okay, well, enjoy. But nonetheless, there can be very specific things about you, what you understand, what you like, your personal, specifications, just like you would have with a parent or a spouse or, yourself, that these AIs will learn about you, and then you can constantly reference. I'm already doing some of this with Notion. I keep a database of everything I read. You already kind of commented on all my notes. But now with your AI tools, you can quickly go summarize certain points, reference certain points, do all this stuff, just bring up this huge repository of information very quickly and very efficiently. And I love the idea too of doing this within businesses and having it approved content. This is a huge concern, especially for a lot of larger organizations, to make sure that the outputs generated from a lot of these, okay, everybody in sales right now is using ChatGPT, and if they're not, they're missing out insanely. But majority of people, especially 20 somethings, are all just, every email now is getting written by ChatGPT. So just know that if you're getting an email, it most likely was written by ChatGPT. And the thing is, though, the outputs, though, are not necessarily always approved messages to the brand. It's not necessarily in the right voice. It may not have the right punches, the right keys to dial in on, the right promises on stuff that you can actually execute on. It's just not the right wording that maybe a script would have. But those scripts are so unversatile, they're so inflexible, that it just doesn't give you the ease that ChatGPT does. But once you start getting company specific AI, repositories, your personal ones, all of these things will make all of that just way more precise. And again, just stuff that you can offload. And we're not talking years away. We're honestly talking, months on some of this, especially for business applications. And that's what we're seeing. The other thing I wanted to touch on for business is just content creation. I mean, I've done this. So we just were at a convention where we did a survey with the people who were putting it on. And from that, it was like, I got a result from SurveyMonkey, which was just like 6 different questions and like some bar charts of what the results were. And what I did is I took those results to the answers and I put them all into ChatGPT. And I go, help me analyze these things. I'm like, and so it built me a PowerPoint presentation on that result. And I was like, cool. Now I want you to turn this into a academic paper format. I want the tone to be this. I want it to be long form. I want it to be in depth, analyzing all of the stuff. It did it. And I was like, awesome. That's really good. And I was like, turn that long form thing into a marketing ebook. So it did that. And then I was like, all right, rewrite this so it was in a professional tone for a leader of this specific conference that I'm going to. And it did. And so I took that content and I put it into Figma. I used Midjourney to generate some AI people that looked real. And I built this really neat booklet in about 4 hours that would have taken most marketing departments probably a week to do, not exaggerating. It was many pages, lots of expanded thoughts, very deeply written, and I didn't change a word. I had to include value propositions for why it should work with us, customize it, had best practices for these companies to use that were actually really good. And built it all in just a matter of hours. And so I was at this conference, and one is I gave it to the people, and I'm like, hey, here's a booklet that we printed. We did a survey, and they're like, oh, this is cool. And then I was like, but there's one special caveat to this. Everything in that book was generated by AI. Like all of the wording, I didn't change a single thing, was done by AI. All of the people you see in there aren't real people. They're all made with AI. And that just wowed everybody because they started to think about the possibilities of every piece of content that I can make can be hyper specific for who I'm making it for in the moment. I don't have to make these boilerplate booklets that I, will need to use every different time for every different customer. Though this can be content specific to that user. And the other point of this is not only can be specific in one medium, I could turn that same kind of content into video content. So we could do that. We could turn it into social media posts. We can use that same thing all across the board and do it in minutes. So all you have to worry about is, again, that unique thing, that unique ability, the main value, the first principles, things that only you can provide to it. And then whatever result you come up with, you can use these AI tools very, very quickly to package that into so many different ways and get that into people in all sorts of mediums. It's just something we've never had access to before. And you just have it all in your fingertips, and you don't have to do it yourself, which is so much nicer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Content creation is the key example of AI right now. That's what text-based AI, Chat GPT. It is the power is shockingly amazing. You're right about the voice. I played around with it. I had a folder on my computer that's several years old, a blog post I wrote long time ago, and I was like, I wanted ChatGPT to write like me. And I was like, oh, but I don't feel like writing it. And I remembered I have this folder of blog posts that I made years ago. So I said, hey, I'm going to upload some writing examples of myself. I want you to analyze it for style, tone, et cetera, so that you can ultimately use that to write and respond as if you were me. Are you ready? It said, yep, I'm ready. I uploaded like 5 different blog posts. It read them all. And then I was like, okay, make another blog post about, I don't know, feeding ducks at a park, whatever, as if you were me. And it was scary. It not only did it, first off, I think it was kind of a smart ass because I have this like blank spot in my mind where I don't understand commas. I don't know. Went through school and I still can't figure out commas, but that's besides the point. It intentionally put in my punctuation mistakes. It intentionally added in a random curse word. It's a bad habit. I'll never get over it. You guys got to live with it. It did everything perfect, just like me. And then I was like, okay, rewrite it as if you were me. And then, edit for punctuation and grammar, that sort of thing. And it did it. And it was like, oh, this is what Wyatt would be like if he had gone to school for English or something like that. It was amazing. And essentially I wrote a 1,000-word blog post in, I don't know what it'd take, like 7 minutes in total of uploading examples and leading the prompt. And that was just playing around. I have no intention of uploading my AI generated blog post about feeding ducks at a park, but the power is amazing. The only I've similar to you at my job, I have kind of unintentionally taken on the role as the AI guy. And the best way I when people want to learn about it, I invite them into a meeting. We pop up on the camera and I share my screen and I pull it up. And the first thing I do is I have them write something about the individual I'm meeting with from the standpoint of Snoop Dogg. Every time without fail, I get a laugh and holy cow, that's amazing. Content creation, manual content creation is dead. I'll make that giant statement right now. Because exactly as you said with salespeople, if you're a salesperson not using ChatGPT or AI in any way, shape, or form, you're falling behind. It's just as simple as that. Because while you may be able to create the most perfect long form sales letter because you have decades of experience, and I believe people out there have this amazing experience and think they can do it better, and maybe they can. But while you are spending hours finalizing that long form sales report, the junior sales guy who showed up and knows how to use ChatGPT just sent out 10, you know, and they are probably just as good, or at least very close, right? That's the competitive edge. It's speed. It's about eliminating necessary tasks. Exactly what we've been talking about this whole episode. Content creation takes a long time, and now it takes minutes, if that.
Yeah, there's just so much you can do with it. And the whole premise is it's just like what the book talked about, eliminating the 80% that doesn't matter. Think about what in your life that you're doing manually that you can automate with these systems. And if you can't do it now, I'm sure it's coming in the horizon. Just a couple other things, just examples to talk about, even on a personal life. Health and fitness is a huge thing. Having AI generate very specific workout plans and different things for you, depending on your needs and all those things, keeping it fun for you so you don't have to think about that yourself or hire a trainer to do that. Shopping and errands. Oh my goodness, this is going to be such a game changer. I know with GPT-4, they showed as an example, like they took a picture of a fridge and had to generate recipes based off of what they had. But they also then took it another level of saying, like, broaden these recipes and then use the plugins feature with Instacart to order in all of the stuff that they didn't have to deliver the door so they could make those recipes. So just the power of, again, think you're spending time thinking about, like, what am I going to have for dinner? What do I have in the cupboard? All of this stuff, all of that can be automated away. So you just constantly have what you enjoy, what you need. Maybe it's a curse if you're not eating as most healthy, but what it is. Other stuff, just basic things like travel planning, having AI build itineraries and different stuff like that. Home management. We're already using things like Google Home to set temperatures and things automatically. I saw a deal with smart mattresses that can have the cooling of your bed and the heating of your bed to be perfect depending on the time of night and your sleep schedule. So you're always at the perfect temperature to keep you asleep. Every aspect of your life right now can be improved by some form of these technologies. And I wouldn't think of that as scary because, again, just think about what you're focusing on. Let's take it back to the very beginning. What are you spending your mental energy to concentrate on? And I've been thinking about this quite a bit because my concentration, honestly, has been terrible. Even while typing those notes for the book, I found myself like randomly picking up my phone, also checking email, also doing other things. And I'm like, holy crap, I stopped mid sentence and I don't even know why, because my mind was so scattered with all this stuff. But if you can just distill it down where you have everything, the 80% is just being automated or done by some of these bots or someone else, and you can just focus deeply and truly on the things that matter, you're going to be way further along in your life than you ever did. And that's where that 10x is. That's where you're shooting for the stars, because you're just like, I'm just so busy. I don't have time. It's like, what if you were just as busy, but only doing the things that matter? Think about how farther your life would be. So you should probably replace yourself with AI, I would say.
So Tanner, as we wrap up, I want to invite you, and you can tell me to piss off. I want to invite you to share what are some of the things you are considering supplementing in your life to get that 10x result. I know you have been deep into this book, and that's awesome. What are some of the actionable things in your life that you are planning to implement because of this book?
The biggest things that I'm going to be doing mostly is just cutting out a lot of the chatter, that hum that goes on with it. So email, honestly, is a huge thing for me. A lot of the stuff going around communication, such as messaging, social media, way like you're just consuming content constantly, I'm going to be cutting out dramatically. And again, just kind of focusing on prioritizing where I want to go and what I want to do. So a great example is this podcast. We have been already seeing such great results from that, but there is so much that we can do to take it further. One of the things that I really think that we need to do, and I want to find AI solutions to help me do that, is build clips from our episodes. So not just shorts where it's like 10 seconds, but a 5-minute great point on something that you talked about or one of our guests talked about, or if I managed to say something decent, we can highlight that and put that on YouTube and have that as a gateway to a bigger audience. Same goes with shorts, clipping the few bits that matter, putting those increasing our reach. But then also start making it easier for scheduling guests, having a better because right now, again, scheduling for us is so manual and following up with them is so manual. And we're constantly getting distracted in doing those things. So that's just one aspect of, honestly, something that's only a few hours of my week, maybe, that I might be able to get 10x leverage off of just by spending the same amount of time, but doing it more effectively. There's other parts with my job. There's other parts with my personal life. It is just dissecting what I'm spending my time on and what is valuable. So that's where I'm taking it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Tanner, I think you finally sold me on this book. You've been trying to sell me for a while now. I'll go deeper than my ChatGPT related notes, but wonderful. Well, all right. Speaking of all of that and taking this podcast further, on that note, if you've made it this far in the podcast, we would love if you would comment, subscribe, share an episode, whether it's YouTube or your preferred podcast provider. We have started getting a lot more feedback, and it's so good, positive or negative. While on the negative part, I wish it was constructive, but mostly positive. It's been wonderful. And please let us know, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We really appreciate all of you, and we want to know what we could do to better serve you. So please reach out. We love hearing from you guys, and it's really cool to start getting the feedback from some of the stuff we put out there. So thank you. Tanner, final notes?
No, love what you just said. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will see you all next week.